Welcome back to Zoom Back Camera, the online film forum of Notre Dame's Browning Cinema. And at the top of our show, we have something we like to say, and I like to read it in order to get it correctly, so I'll go ahead and do that now. During these uncertain times that have moved us out of the physical Browning Cinema and into a virtual one, our thoughts are with those battling the virus, battling isolation, battling precarity, and battling the fear inherent to this moment. And alongside that, we want to extend our thanks and appreciation to first responders, medical professionals, grocers, public transit workers, childcare workers, and anyone else on the front lines. Zoom Back Camera is a very small thing to offer, but we do hope these conversations about movies we love will buoy your day and continue the education, fellowship, and dialogue with which we bracket our films in the Browning Cinema. And as we like to do in the Browning Cinema, feel free to say hello in the comments. Along the way, I'll be reading the chat, trying to incorporate it back into the conversation. So if you have any thoughts or comments, please do leave those and we will do our best to attend to them. Now with that, I would like to welcome to the show and thank you for joining us on this Earth Day Eve, Catherine Perry. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, who you are and what you do, Catherine? Oh, I think you have to unmute first.
I'm sorry, I thought I had unmuted earlier.
Oh, no worries.
Okay.
Roughly
Hi, Ricky.
50% of the time that happens. Hi. I was just inviting you to tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's a wonderful opportunity for us film lovers to enjoy discussions and watch movies, for me at least, that I've never seen. So I can't attend every evening, but I try to be regular. Every week.
Thank you for showing up.
Okay, well, thank you. I love this initiative. So my name, Catherine Perry. I'm now a retired professor of French, literature and culture, and a little smattering of film at Notre Dame. And I was born and raised in Switzerland, which explains why I turned to French. I was in French-speaking Switzerland in Lausanne, but raised by parents from Boston. So I grew up bilingual. It sort of made sense at one point in my life to study French. It's really, I'm totally bilingual. I dream in French and English. So now that I'm retired, I have given a little time and effort to some nonprofit or volunteer opportunities, one of which has been the Pollination Project, where I read people who try to get a little startup grant. So I read applications and give my opinion. I've been volunteering for the International Cultic Studies Association. That's not Celtic, but cultic, having to do with cults. I write a little report for them every now and then on what's going on in the French-speaking world. I also volunteer a little bit for the Humane Party, which is a animal rights party. I work a little bit on their online journal, I edit. And most importantly, and that's become the huge part of my life now, is I work for VegFest, Michiana VegFest. And Michiana VegFest is a development of VegFest. VegFests are annual food festivals that are held everywhere in the world, and to celebrate plant-based eating, compassion for animals, and sustaining the environment, what is environmentally friendly. And we started ourselves in 2018, but before there was already some interest because there was an event organized by Beacon Health that drew a lot of interest. And then locally, I've been part of, well, actually I created a meetup group, Veg Michiana. I'm also an admin for a Facebook group called Veg Michiana. There's another Facebook group. So all in all, we're about 1,000 in the area who are interested in plant-based eating for various reasons. People come at this from 3 different sides, either animal rights or health or the environment. And as I like to say, it's a triple win because it's good for everything. And VegFest, so typically a VegFest will have several speakers who, nationally or internationally well-known speakers who will speak about one of these aspects. They will have chef demos, cooking demos with free food, free sampling. They will have also lots of vendors who sell food, prepared food, or they prepare it right there on the spot, or clothing, accessories. Everything is free from animal cruelty and animal use. So they are vegan events. And as I said, we started in 2018. We held our first event at Notre Dame. It was an amazing event in March 2018. We were expecting maybe 500 people, and over 2,000 showed up. There were way more than we could handle. We didn't have the room, even though we were in one of those beautiful new buildings with so much space. So the last year, we organized it at the Century Center in South Bend. And there we had about 4,000 people. And that was April 2019. And now we were going to have it this coming Sunday, 26th of April, 2020. And unfortunately with COVID-19, we had to postpone. And so far we're hoping to hold our event on the 18th of October. So we'll see how that works. And let me just put up something here in my background image. I'll come back to my natural self later. So
hey,
there we are.
The billboard.
Oh, wait a minute. This is the old one. I'm sorry. It should say it should say October 18.
Well, we still get to see the very nice new logo.
Right, exactly. And if I move away, you can see the website, michianavegfest.org, where we have a lot of resources and information. Most of the speakers that we booked for this April are available for October. So we hope that everything will work out well. But I just read the news that maybe we'll have a worst wave of the coronavirus coming up in late fall. So who knows?
But even without the big gathering, people can learn more about it by visiting your website.
Exactly. And I didn't mention this, but our event is free. And that's because we worked really hard to get grants from national organizations and local businesses and organizations. We're now a nonprofit organization, so all gifts are tax deductible. And oh yeah, and we've developed a branch called Michiana Veg EDU, which we received a very generous grant from Beacon Community Outreach to educate local people about the health benefits of plant-based eating, and especially the vulnerable population. And we've now been working with the Center for the Homeless, the YWCA, Spa Women's Ministry in Elkhart, and others. So this is an ongoing effort. So it's not just one event, Veg Fest, but an ongoing effort to help educate local community. And really the basic reason for Veg Fest, the deeper reason, is that eating a healthier plant-based diet can prevent and even reverse major chronic diseases such as heart disease, cancer, stroke, and diabetes. Also, animal agriculture impacts the environment in many ways. It destroys natural animal and plant habitats through deforestation. It makes excessive use of water. The methane gas released by cows and other animals contributes massively to global warming. And runoff waters from fertilizers also cause pollution and dead zones in the ocean. So it's really, the goal is to educate people in a fun way, because Veg Fests are really fun. People are amazed by the food that they discover. They would never know that it's vegan, because food makers just develop these fantastic recipes. So some are not so healthy and others are very healthy. So there's a bit for everyone. Those who want comfort food will find it. And that's not free, of course, they have to buy it. It's just the sampling from the food demos that is free. But the whole event is free and it's wonderful. So we welcome everybody.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, thousands of people come through this annually, and it was set to be that this year. And last year we were, the Browning Cinema loved the partnership in showing films about plant-based eating and acknowledgement of the environment. It was a wonderful partnership, and thank you again for the partnership tonight.
Oh, that was so wonderful last year. Thank you so much. Those 3 films. We watched Jane, Plant, what is it? Plant Pure Nation, and Eating Animals, based on Jonathan Safran Foer's book. Yeah, that was great.
And so even if, because I know a lot of people recognize it as the major annual event, but there are a lot of ways to tie in if you're interested and want more information on the website again,
right? Exactly.
michiganvegfest.org, and you're active around the calendar with getting the word out to various groups. And if people are interested in offering their time, talent, and treasure, go to the website and contact you. Is that the best pathway there?
Yes, we have a general email, which is just info@michianavegfest.org. I have mine, which is Catherine@michianavegfest.org, Catherine with a C. So we have each one of us. We're an executive committee of 3, and then we have a board. We have about 8 or 9 people on the board. Yeah, so it's become pretty official. I never imagined that years ago. We became so bold because, Veg Fests are a big affair. It's a lot of organizing.
Well, great. And so if viewers are out there with interest, either for their own education and edification, or for wanting to get out and help, because I know a lot of people who do want to be involved.
We have a page for volunteers. Volunteers can sign up and say what they're interested in doing, and we'll welcome them.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, with that, we're going to do a different film to head into Veg Fest, but unfortunately it wasn't available online so much. So we're going to talk about another film that looks at environmentalism and the food industry from a much more popular large scale, and that is Okja by Bong Joon-ho, who became very popular this year because he won Best Director at the Academy Awards, and his film Parasite became the first foreign language film to win Best Picture. So his prominence on the mantle is higher, which gives a good vantage point to review some of his previous work. Those of you might know his films The Host and Snowpiercer, as well as this, Okja, which didn't get as much hype as some of the other films because it debuted on Netflix and had an embargo at first. Are you familiar with this at Cannes, Catherine?
Oh, yes. At the Cannes Festival, normally films that are screened at the festival have to be released in theaters in France. And because this film was produced by Netflix did not want to release it in theaters. And so Cannes was caught between a rock and a hard place because they wanted to show the film at the same time. They couldn't, they disapproved of it. So from what I understand, there was a lot of controversy. And there was even some booing at first when the Netflix logo came up on the screen. Mm-hmm. But fortunately, this movie was released in Cannes and that screened at the festival, and I think it deserves it. It's it's just too bad that it's exclusively for TV and for small screens, because the filmmaker is well known and he does a remarkable job with films, and this one deserves to be viewed on a large screen in a theater.
And Netflix has learned its lesson in some ways. Before, it was impossible to get the rights to these films unless you were a coastal cinema that they were using in order to qualify for something like an Academy Awards nomination. Now they're much better about giving out rights so that we were able to screen, for example, The Irishman, whereas we couldn't get the rights to Roma. And so if this film had come a couple of years later, I think more people would have been able to see it on the big screen. But catching it on your laptop or your TV or your phone, whatever, the message is still there, even if not in scale and scope as it might have been.
Yeah, right. And I understand that Bong, the filmmaker, had complete freedom to do whatever he wanted, and he had a huge budget from Netflix. So that explains a lot, that he was happy to have that freedom.
Yeah, and explains why the
film is
so
slightly
beautiful.
Controversial. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, just because it's a little controversial topic, he didn't have to, bend to someone else's dictates.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's hop into the movie then. It begins, I think one reason it is controversial is it has a sprawling multinational corporation, an agrochemical corporation called Morando, not far from Monsanto.
Right.
And at the beginning, we meet Tilda Swinton, who's playing a twin role, a sister act, Lucy and Nancy. And we meet Lucy, who is giving the Gwyneth Paltrow kind of effect to this old corporation with the Steve Jobs on steroids type launch. It gets into the questions of how these corporations for social good pull out and lay out messages. And I'm curious how you feel about that with, vegan products or plant-based products, how they present themselves to the public.
Yeah, and first I would just like to observe that in a very short shot at the beginning, we see a skyscape of New York and different labels attached to buildings that all have something to do with the Morando Corporation. And one of them is called Whole Food. The other one is Organic Beauty Products. And this is the kind of thing that I would go. I go to Whole Foods and shop, and I like to buy organic, essentials. So it's hard to know where all of that comes from. And I think the movie is dramatizing it very well. And personally, I know that some people are really upset because small companies that were doing vegan food, creating vegan food, were bought by corporations like Tyson. And I see it as something positive because it gets the product out to a much larger market, and it's profitable. So that means that these corporations are moving in the direction of producing more plant-based foods, which I think is a good thing for all the reasons I've already mentioned. So yeah, but it's unsettling. We live in a corporate society. We live in a capitalist society, and it's hard to avoid.
It is. Well, it's not hard to avoid when you are in the mountains of South Korea.
Right.
And so we pop out of New York and we head there, and we meet Okja, a super pig, I guess is what we can call her, and Mija, her caretaker. And the relationship the two of them have. And it's something where we learn very quickly that this is an exceptional pig, or a spectacular pig. It's a Charlotte's Web kind of play, right?
Or babe, you know.
Babe, right.
That's
exactly.
The precedent that I saw, yeah.
Right. And how do you, does that device work for you? Like meeting an animal with whom you fall in love, and then the idea that, oh, it's, like I said, incrementalist, that, oh, you'll grow your love broadly to others. Does it work in this film or generally as a device for you?
Huh. I think in my case, personally, yes, because I grew up loving cows. I grew up in Switzerland.
Switzerland.
I was totally in love with them. I even pretended to be a cow. I made myself a makeshift bell when I was 4 years old, and I would prance around in the garden wearing my bell and pretending I was a cow. Then I shifted to horses, and I think it's because I probably discovered I was eating cows. How could I love them and eat them at the same time? Anyhow, yeah, I think all of that came back to me later in life, definitely. So loving an animal when you're very young, I think, can make a big difference to how you view other forms of life when you're an adult. It sows a seed. But I must say, Okja, right, she's a super pig. She's a kind of combination of pig and manatee and hippopotamus, very strange creature. But she is first of all, she is a genetically modified animal. And the reason she's in this kind of Edenic setting in southern Korean mountains is that she was sent there by the Mirando Corporation. So there's nothing really natural about her, or not that much that's natural about her. And that's a little bit disquieting. Plus, of course, she's a CGI creature.
Yeah.
So we're not even seeing a real animal, not even a modified animal.
Mm-hmm. That is very interesting how within the film it's operating in a similar, and it does comment on that. It winks to that a couple of points, but the fact that the two are created out of whole cloth, either in this lab in New York City or in the animation studios of, Tate Street or whoever the production company was. It's an interesting parallel. And the entering into, you use the word Edenic, and that's good. Entering into that world, we get the dispatches from the Mirando Corporation who come to reclaim Okja, and this would be this kind of secondary villain middleman, Dr. Johnny. Can't remember his last name. Dr. Johnny.
Yeah, that's how he's called. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And he is part of a particular strand of satire in this movie. With that character generally, do you like how satire is used? We're going to get a lot of various genres, but the satire in this movie, is it piercing for you? Does it work?
Well, I think in that scene when he first comes up to the Korean farm, it works very well. I think he's quite funny, and I enjoyed it. I got some laughs out of it, especially when at the end the Okja snorts on him because he just said something outrageous and he quickly caught it. But he said it's very healthy. But you know, there are moments like that that are very funny. Or when he opens the refrigerator and he finds old shoes, I had to stop and go back on that scene to find out what it was in the in the refrigerator. Yeah, and then oh, anyhow, yeah, and and also when he suddenly sees Oksha, and you have this kind of revelation choir music, you know, very religious, like a religious experience. So it's well done, I think. It's entertaining.
Mhm.
And it really shows how the outside world is intruding into this little paradise with its dangers, but it's still a little paradise. It's nature,
Yeah.
not New
And the
York.
danger of extracting sound bites, like the very small snippets that they're taking are not giving a very full picture. And so,
Yes,
yeah, the 30-second news spot
right.
or ad is disingenuous kind of in its form. And the grandpa and Misha then he takes her away and offers her the a golden pig, which we learn will be the I guess the succedaneum for losing her pet. And they return and they have a very interesting conversation where grandpa and Misha are talking about the values that they have and whether or not she should be broken up. I thought it was interesting that at the end of the day, he really can't see past the value, or he underscores it for his granddaughter that pigs are made to be eaten. No,
Right.
that is their purpose.
He
How do
says
you?
it's their fate, which brings us to tragedy, really.
Yeah.
The word fate, yeah.
How do you? And this is part of the Veg Fest hat. How do you change the minds of people who have a difficult time seeing beyond that? That this is the role of a cow. This is the role of a goat or whatnot. And what else they are meant to do if not that?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very tough question to answer, but I think the movie's trying to do that. The
Mm-hmm.
movie's trying to do it by showing the emotional relationship of a very authentic young girl, Misha, and how she cares and how she's got one passion. She's single minded. She won't argue. She just goes for the goal. She loves Oksha and she'll get her back no matter what. And I think seeing, and you know, the director, I think he said that the film is from her perspective, which I found interesting because I thought there were multiple perspectives. But in the end, I think that's what he's doing. He's showing us how the love of a very authentic person who isn't caught up in this mercantile transactional world with all their interests can actually turn around a situation. But it's not just that, unfortunately. It's also the revealing of what happens. And you see that when there's the pig fest, not a veg fest at all,
No.
um, in New York. And the ALF is able to show on a screen what happened to Oksha in the lab, the rape scene, and what Dr. Johnny was saying, which he revealed himself, what he was really thinking and doing. And the crowd turns around and they say, "Save that pig." So they were moved by the images on the screen. I think that's a kind of statement on what this film is trying to achieve. And in case people missed it, at the very end, after the credits have rolled through, we see a scene with Jay from the Animal Liberation. He is released from prison. Then he joins Kim, who's the driver for the Mirondo Corporation in South Korea, the one who didn't care about the corporation because he didn't feel any attachment, any loyalty. And he's become an ALF person. And they're going all over the country to reveal Mirando's double dealings. So it's a hopeful message at the end that this will work. And I think that there are different ways of getting the message across. And I think art is a very powerful way. You know, a movie that is at once uplifting in some ways, very entertaining, a lot of fun with humor, and then some tragedy and very dark moments that sort of wham you at the end. But I think that's really what the director is trying to do, to bring an awareness of what happens to animals, and specifically mammals, because this isn't a vegan film. Okja and her grandfather eat fish. Oh, I'm sorry, Okja. Mija. Okja helps her fish by throwing herself in the water so that she can just pick up a fish that landed on the ground. And they eat chicken soup also. So they have chickens running around. So I have the impression that it's much more a film that is trying to reveal the abuses of animal agri-industry and the suffering of animals. And mammals are very closely tied to humans. We are all mammals.
Now, you brought up the Animal Liberation Front, ALF, and you mentioned how they're trying to get footage and expose and do that work. I'm curious, you know, we have been seeing for a very long time images, news stories, exposés about horrible conditions that in which animals live in these stockyards and large sprawling agribusiness farms. Is that something that you think is just we need to keep revisiting along with the more fantastic and entering that social imaginaire, or
That's a $1 million question.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
You know, I think the film also gets us to think about the individual that is Okja. She's an individual. We learn to know her. We appreciate her. We become fond of her. And when she goes into the slaughterhouse and is about to be slaughtered, then we're really on her side. We want her to survive. But at the same time, we see these thousands of other super pigs that are all a kind of amorphic mass. And you cannot really distinguish an individual among them, except the parents who send their little kid to be saved with Okja and Mija. So I think, you know, it's like you save one, and it really matters to that one, and it matters to you. And maybe it joins your question earlier, you know, when you love an animal, are you going to carry that to others later on? There's no real answer to your question, because I think there's some very brave people who try to reveal abuses. You know, recently we discovered that a very famous dairy farm in northern Indiana was abusing the cows. Workers were abusing the cows, and that's a whole other can of worms, because as the film also shows, the people working at the slaughterhouse are speaking in Spanish. You have lots of immigrants who work in horrible conditions. Slaughterhouse work is one of the most dangerous, if not the most dangerous kind of work.
And today, and during the coronavirus,
yes,
you see outbreaks there, adding more danger and threat to a very unprotected class of workers.
Exactly. And films have shown that too. So it's not just animals who suffer, it's also humans. And, from a plant-based perspective, it's not necessary to eat meat because you have plenty of proteins in the plant world, grains and nuts and seeds that contain everything you need for a healthy, balanced life. And obviously, we're going to reach 10 billion on Earth in about 2050. And obviously, we can't feed all of these humans with animal foods. So something has got to give somewhere. And I think a film like this helps see the
And
necessity.
one thing it does, and I mentioned this a little bit before with satire, but it blends a lot of genres, be it from kind of a Mission Impossible, James Bond hijacking car chase, to heavy family drama, to satire, to comedy when they are kind of poking fun at people who try to live the exceptional perfectionism of an environmental lifestyle, or other jokes that are occurring within ALF. Does the mix of genres, which we also see in something like Snowpiercer or Parasite, work for you to carry that message further?
Well, I was thinking how the mixture of genres is unsettling. So you're not, you can't really define the movie as one genre or another. You're sort of kept on your toes. You're unhinged at moments, and there are moments that are totally surprising. So I think that provokes a kind of openness in the viewer to start perceiving things a bit differently. And you certainly don't expect the ending, well, the last gruesome scenes. But yeah, you were talking about parody and satire, and the ALF, even though I think the filmmaker is very sympathetic to them, at the same time, he shows their shortcomings. They're supposed to be nonviolent. Yet Jay, the leader, becomes very violent with Kay when he learns that Kay didn't translate correctly.
Yeah, that's an interesting line when Jay, banishes Kay from the ALF while beating him and taking his things.
Yes, using them temporarily.
And we get the line, translation is sacred. As someone who comes from the comp lit world, how did you feel about that moment?
I thought that was a really interesting moment. It focuses on language, and the film also has, some focus on language when Misha learns English, and that's going to help her reclaim Okja, which she wouldn't have been able to do. She wouldn't have been able to talk to Nancy directly to get Okja out of the slaughterhouse. So, and that shows her determination to do what it takes. And yeah, I think it's Kay who says to her, learn English, it opens up doors. But that's a question of translation. So he knows, he goes back and forth between the Korean and the English, and he deliberately mistranslates because he doesn't want the mission to end. And that, of course, brings about a whole lot of periplicies. But translation is about faithful representation. So I think it's there, the statement is there, and it's even engraved as a tattoo on Kay's arm, we find out later in the film, as a reminder that actually a film is also trying to translate something real, and how to best do it. How can the film be faithful to something and do a good translation that will not be a lie? And the question of lies is so interesting also. It's totally related to language, but so many people lie in this film, like the grandfather twice. He claims that he paid for Okja and that Okja will belong to them. Then he lies about a dream he had of Mija's parents the night before, so he lures her away to the graves. Then the Lucy from the Mirando Corporation lies, and she says all these little white lies, and she bemoans them, but they are like necessary because people don't accept genetically modified foods. So you have to lie to them instead of trying to repair the situation. And who else lies? The translator. And then the ALF, when they talk to Mija, they say it's all lies. There are millions of super pigs who are going to be taken to the slaughterhouse. So we're in a world filled with deceit. And that's why I think Mija is so great, because she's straightforward and she doesn't lie. She is who she is. Like Okja.
She has a, like Greta Thunberg has a similar ethos, I would say. It's, I'm focused, here's the truth, and I'm not going to deviate from that course. Like I want the world to change its practices, and Mija wants her super pig back.
Right, exactly. Very good parallel. Yeah. I wonder if Greta Thunberg watched the movie. Maybe she did. She's vegan, you know, so.
Yeah, I was thinking, one person who doesn't lie is Frank, I believe is his name. This is the assistant executive, who we see almost working in a, let's say it's like just a guerrilla corporate role, like moving seamlessly from Lucy to Nancy. And I think he's always telling the truth. He's not a shady character. He always exposes himself. And the fact that he's kind of this gun for hire, essentially.
And he puts ideas in Lucy's mind, because obviously she's not creative enough or imaginative enough to come up with a solution. And that's how to go against the damaging.
Mm-hmm. He's actively puppeting her in the opening scene, and understanding that, oh, it's a nice moment where we realize corporations tell the truth. Like not the figureheads might have a different message, but if you look at the underlying structure, which I think he represents, right? Like he's the gears in the machine, that it exposes itself. It doesn't lie to you. The rest is window dressing, but you know.
Yeah, that's a little bit like Nancy at the end. She's much more straightforward. She sees a business opportunity. She says, sure, the gold is real. I'll take that pig and let my customer have first-class treatment to go back to Korea with her pig. Mm-hmm. So Lucy, on the other hand, is trying to adulterate the truth. She doesn't want people seeing what really is happening. Nancy is more straightforward in that sense. And the same actress playing both roles is great. There's a split screen moment where they're sitting next to each other. I thought that was cool.
Oh, with their pink and green Nat Shermans.
Yes, Nat Shermans.
That is a nice shot. Getting back to, let's run to the scene where, you know, we talked about workers in, well, generally we have a large corporation and we start to see people who are in the middle ranks display some of their anger. And one way we see that is with Dr. Johnny, after he's been affronted by Lucy. He gets drunk and he pushes that pain onto Okja. Did that scene work for you when he lashes out at her?
Well, he's drunk, so he's way over the top. It's an outrageous scene. It's really grotesque and very shocking and not very realistic, although it has its own message, I think, about the abused becoming the abuser and taking it out on on someone who's helpless, more helpless than he is, because he's lost his power. He thought he was the spokesman for the Miranda Corporation. And he's no longer that. So he's humiliated, defeated, and he just reacts in a very mean and despicable way, of course. I mean, I don't want to judge, but it's clearly that's going on.
We're to read it that way.
Yeah.
And staying on him for a second, during the pandemic, I was just reading a couple of articles that say, now's the time to axe the celebrity wellness character. Dr. Johnny here as the celebrity biologist.
Oh yeah, right.
I think the direct reference would be a Dr. Oz, someone like that. I'm curious how you get your popular wellness news. Where do you read? Where do you find your information? As we're in these worlds of vast medical information and health advice and food related advice, how do you kind of set a North Star, and how do you learn about the world?
Well, I try to read reliable press, first of all. But I think one thing is clear, and thank you for sort of suggesting it, is that we are at a time when we realize, hopefully more and more, that zoonotic diseases like the coronavirus are, transmitted to us from animals because we live in first of all, they live in too much close proximity, huddled together, and then we are too close to them as well. If animals were just in the wild, we wouldn't have these terrible viruses and diseases. Most diseases come from, these kinds of diseases come from animals, other animals. So it's maybe a good time to start thinking about what we eat and how we produce our food. Another thing is, well, I have some favorite organizations like Plant Pure Communities, and I forgot to mention that Veg Michiana, which is a group that I am an admin of, we're a pod of Plant Pure Communities, which means we get support from them. They're a nonprofit organization with doctors, and so they are pretty straightforward. I also follow a little bit what Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine does. Organizations like that, which I think are pretty straightforward. And that's not the New York Times, but I do read the New York Times and other news sources to try, and Le Monde in France. I'm registered to Le Monde. I subscribe to it and I read them every day also, watch the French news.
Yeah, you get various voices.
Yes,
too, right?
Exactly. The more perspectives. Yeah. So several perspectives combined to make a fuller picture. But it's very hard because in the beginning they were saying we don't need masks. No, we should be wearing masks. So we're groping in the dark with a disease that's still vastly unknown and not understood yet.
So back to a big moment in the film. This was the key line for me in some ways. This is a conversation. Nancy's returned. So this is after Okja's been sprung from Pigfest. And Nancy returns and tells her, if it's cheap, they'll eat it. And that came up in a recent conversation we had here on Zoom back camera about Soylent Green. It's something that I also remember, people who work in food tell me, it's that there are so many people who are looking to simply get the most calories for their dollar, even if many calories of work go into that calorie, right?
Yes.
That is an inefficient process, but people gravitate toward the dollar menu or whatnot because you get a lot of bang for your buck. How does how do you or the people with whom you work counteract that message that cheap meat isn't necessarily the answer here.
Right. Well, first of all, in the movie, you know, Lucy says it has to be effing good, right? That's one criterion, and the other is the cheapness, and the other is lying about, you know, the meat, the production. But so taste matters, and so another thing that the movie doesn't talk about, but we know that the government subsidizes the meat industry heavily, because it would be losing money if there weren't that subsidy. So that's what helps in great part the meat to be cheap. Of course, it's mass produced, but the argument would be that there are delicious foods outside of meat, and just get people to taste them. And that's one of the roles of VegFest, is to make those foods available, and then to encourage local businesses, which are becoming more and more veg friendly in our area, all the way to Michigan and, you know, South Bend, Elkhart, Mishawaka, all these places around us. And they realize that there is that this is profitable, that they can, you know, survive on selling a little bit of plant-based food. And there are restaurants that make that offer wonderful food that it's not very expensive. And also there are books published on this, like how to eat plant-based on $5 a day or less. You know, don't need to go to McDonald's and get this really damaging food for your organism. You can live a much healthier life. So it's not a question of expense, really. I mean, if expense comes into the picture, there are lots of counter arguments. It's just what people are used to, what they grow up to eat, what the family taught you to eat. It's a cultural phenomenon. And I know I was raised in a very strong meat-eating family. And
in Switzerland, you're gonna
yeah,
meat and potatoes.
Yes, and then I lived in Morocco for 10 years, and that's heavily meat-based as well. So it was, you know, a long, long journey for me to start realizing that I didn't need to eat meat. And it just takes education and persistence and just making resources available and showing people that they really don't need it. It's, you know, their whole diet doesn't have to be centered around animal food.
So I thought that was one of the strongest lines in the film. One of the most poignant scenes in the film is when Misha and ALF go to the fields of the super pigs, and in turn the abattoir. Thoughts on that scene, what it dredged up for you, emotions, what it evoked?
Okay, so I saw Okja when it was first released, but before that I had seen several documentaries. And the first one is a documentary by Franjou. It's a short movie called Le Sang des Bêtes, which is translated as Beasts, I think.
Yeah, Blood of the Beast.
Blood of the Beasts. And that was the first time I ever saw, well, no, because I lived in Morocco and I saw twice the slaughtering of a ram for, you know, during the religious feast, the greatest feast of the year, which is a feast for all except the ram. But so that film really impressed me. And it's a black and white movie of the 40s, I think, was done right after the Second World War was over. And it's
available, you can find it online.
Exactly.
If you were to search it, FRANJU.
That's how I saw it. Then I watched other documentaries like Earthlings, which is very rough. It shows 5 ways that we humans interact or use animals for food, entertainment, medicine, etc., clothing. So I was already a little bit aware of what that scene could be. And it was no different from some documentaries that I've seen. It's very realistic because it shows you the carcasses, the body parts, the blood on the ground. And Mija is discovering that for the first time. So we're in her shoes, and it's very horrifying.
And it's very interesting to me. It begins, I think I have the sequence correctly, but even if not, the foil still maintains. It's very dystopian in the fields. It's gray, it's overcast. You can't, it is faceless. I mean, the masses are really faceless. And
Yes.
then when you go inside, in the fluorescence, you see the opposite, how well oiled that machine is and how Fordian the process has become in comparison to the world outside. And that was a very, talking about going from different moments that are jarring. That one is a very jarring moment for me that I think was effective.
Yes, if anybody, if people hadn't seen something like that before, then it would be very shocking.
Yeah.
Very, very shocking. And even the turning, stunning the animal and then the turning of the animal, and all that is totally realistic. Mm-hmm. And the efficiency, with which the animals are processed.
And like Blood of the Beast, talking about how these systems, these mass systems of killing, are created by humans, in reference to that one is using kind of meat production to look back on the Holocaust and comment on it in some ways. And this is doing kind of the opposite. It's pulling Holocaust imagery into the meat production industry. So interesting parallel there.
Yes, and it's not uncommon. There's a book called Eternal Treblinka about the slaughterhouses. So it's something that has been going on, and a discussion that's been going on of creating that parallel, and some people don't approve of it and others use it. There's a lot of arguing going back and forth in the veg community.
Understandably. Yes.
Yeah. How can animals be compared to humans, and others say, no, they're sentient beings just like we are. They feel pain, they feel joy, they have emotions, they reason even. Of course, Okja is a super beast, so she reasons better than any known dog or pig. Pigs are very smart. They're just as smart, or even smarter than dogs. Yeah. Anyhow, yeah.
The seeing Okja in the slaughterhouse actually reminded me of a story that I remember. So I would go into vegetarian modes as a child. And I remember one of them, the story that my dad told me, and it came to me again during this movie. And that was, he grew up in a small town in southeast South Dakota, probably of 1,200 people. And outside of Sioux Falls and near Mitchell, South Dakota, for example, where George McGovern was from. Anywho, so a small town and lived on a farm, and he raised a steer for 4-H and had that relationship with Okja, just daily tending to the steer, and it's something that you are going to show, and so it's prized, and you have a very strong bond. And pride is so equal, and then pride for the way one might in a parental relationship. And when the day came to take the steer to be slaughtered, it wouldn't get on the truck to go. And they called my dad in from the house because the steer trusted him to lead him into the truck, and so that he would, eventually go off. And I think that that came to me. I was like, oh, seeing that relationship that is so, it's parental, it's a sibling relationship between Mija and Okja, and seeing it end positively was great. I was like, oh, this is erasing some like generational trauma that was built into me with that story. So that was it was seeing it end positively. It was great, and the way it happens, as we mentioned before, is Misha offers in exchange for Okja the golden pig in a very like directly, capital exchange. How did you feel about that relationship and how it's resolved with Nancy and Misha?
You mean the relationship with Okja?
No.
Oh,
Sorry. So when it comes time to be saved, and what saves her is
the
directly
golden
paying
pig.
for,
Yes,
the
right.
golden pig. Yeah. How did
Well,
you feel about that moment?
I'd like to address what you said earlier
Oh,
about
sure.
your father quickly.
Mhm.
And I think the movie really highlights that, the bond that develops between a child and an animal they're close to. And it's made all the more significant because Misha is an orphan. She's lost her parents, she doesn't even remember them. So Okja is everything to her. I mean, her grandfather is also important, but Okja is her playmate, her friend, her sister, her mother. I mean, they have even this very close physical bond. And the end, I thought it was really interesting how the father had bought this gold pig for Misha and how she threw it away because she didn't want to have anything to do with that world of transactions. And then she did take it with her and she broke her piggy bank, which the piggy bank, it's a pig. There are little moments like that that are fun to watch. But I think that, yes, her earnestness, her authenticity, her love for Okja, none of that really matters because she's come to a capitalist world where what matters is actual transactions. And so she's able to get Okja back by exchanging the golden pig. And I was going to say the golden calf, but
Yeah.
it's a little bit that. Yeah,
Hmm.
so I don't think that on the force of her emotion alone, she would have been able to get Okja back.
Hmm.
So it's I don't know what kind of conclusion that that brings to the movie. Just
Hmm.
that you finally have to operate in terms of how the world operates.
And continue the outside game. So if that's the inside game,
Yeah,
buy them out, change them. You still
right.
have to put your ski mask on and and,
Yeah.
infiltrate and shine lights on or give sunshine to moldy situations.
And when you talk about ALF, I was just going to remark that there are two organizations in this film, and both of them are trying to use Okja for their own ends. Even the ALF, has this desire to use her to get a more powerful message across. So it's a moral quandary. It's an ethical dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
The means justify the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't
And
think the film resolves that.
no, it leaves it open
Yeah,
intelligently and lets you
yes.
see. Yeah. And means to an end. With the end, they leave the processing plant as you continue to hear the elevator and the stun gun, and so things are continuing, even though not only Oksha has been saved, but one other that the child will be coming with them to South Korea, the piglet. And then we end in back in South Korea with kind of Eden restored and things gained, lessons learned, and almost a discussion between Mija and Oksha toward the end there. And I'm curious, so now we've chatted about it for an episode. And if you were to pin down, what do you see as the takeaway? What's the big pull here for you?
Oh, goodness. I think, well, it ends as a comedy should, with a happy ending after all that, fortunately. But the major pull, I think, is it's for me, it's always how art represents reality or issues. And I think that the major pull away is really how efficient the film is in getting a message across. I think it does it very well. You know, there are moments that are really outrageous, but it's also an entertainment.
Mhm.
It's not designed to be a documentary.
Mhm.
It
Yeah,
gets
which
at us through all the means possible, all the creativity of the filmmaker.
Mhm. Yeah, and
Yeah.
supplements the other things that we read or the more fact-based items. And you need those to open up log jams and to reach new people and yeah, have other people take away whatever they need to take away from it to potentially change a very large, sprawling system. So
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Catherine, for curating with this film and chatting about it.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun, and there's so much more that we should talk about, but
Oh, well, we're
time
not
is limited.
okay. Was there anything else that you wanted to get out there that you thought was a
Let me see. I was thinking about my childhood and stories that inspired me,
Mhm.
you know, and I was thinking how my friend Flika really was very important, even though, you know, the hero is a boy. I totally identified with him, and I read the 3 books, you know, and that sort of uh, solidified my love of horses before, you know, other animals.
Mhm.
Um,
Did you were there any films along with that, or was it really books for you as a child? Were you
well, I grew up without TV. My parents were purists, so we went to movies from time to time with them. Um, I don't really remember a movie, you know, like I don't have some of the American cultural references because I didn't grow up in the States. So I can't tell you exactly, no. It's more books,
Mhm. Mhm.
but yeah.
Yeah. um, I'm trying to think what I had um I had I think mine I really like Scooby Doo. I think that was big for me. that was I think that made me really love dogs and enjoy that.
Okay, yes. Well, I grew up with a cat, so of course I loved cats, and I live with cats. And yeah,
Mhm.
all
So
happy family.
and it's yeah, it's various ways in to find those connections. And you have
Yes,
cats. You have cats now.
yes. We live with 2 cats. We had up to 4, but you know, they pass away.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
Well, that's good company too during times of isolation. So.
absolutely. They're wonderful companions.
Mhm.
And they have so much personality. Each one of them is so different from the others. There's certain basic tendencies in cats, basic characteristics like they purr, you know, they shoot up their elevator tail when they're happy and things like that. But then they each have their own character and very different.
Mhm.
So and they give us a lot. We give them and they give us. And it's hard because these animals are, you know, they were wild at one point, and there's this kind of symbiotic relationship with humans, just like dogs. You know, it's something that we can't change anymore. We can't release cats in the wild. They've come to depend on us, and the same with dogs and the breeding of dogs. It's a huge, huge issue, of course. We just adopt cats, gutter cats, who need to be adopted, who need a life, you know, of
Mhm.
security and love.
Great. Well, Catherine, when we end the show, we like to do a questionnaire. Would you be game?
Sure, go
Okay.
ahead.
Well, as you know, Proust had a younger younger sister named Becky. As a French scholar, you know about
Absolutely.
this, right?
Oh,
And
yes, a
Becky,
Proustian scholar. He had
and
a brother, and the way he got back at his brother is by not featuring him in the novel. The narrator is a single child. That's
that's
pretty
a
good.
that's
For
a
three
that's a
for
cold dish
3,000
of
pages.
revenge.
Yeah,
I was gonna say,
no brother.
maybe opportunity too. Well, Becky, who I don't think is in the book either, wrote a 5-question questionnaire to determine whether or not you love movies. It's scientifically valid. I just put my glasses, and away we go. Do you remember the first R-rated movie that you saw?
Okay, looking back, I think it was Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Roman Polanski.
Uh-huh.
I would have liked to say The Fearless Vampire Killers, but I don't think it's R-rated. Whereas Rosemary's Baby is, because there's a violent sex scene at one point and some nudity. And I was not 18 then. This was 1968. I don't know how I got in, but Switzerland had rules, just like the States do, but I got in. I don't know how. I must have looked very mature.
Or snuck in, either way.
That impressed me. I told you I work for this Cultic Studies Association, and the movie has to do with cults. So it's sort of right up my alley.
So what movie would you be compelled to buy, even though you may already own a copy of it, if you found it at Picker's Paradise for $2?
Wow, do they sell movies for $2? Okay, I'll believe you. Maybe Tony Gatliff's Lacho Drome. It's a kind of dramatized documentary of the Roma people from when they left India and went through Europe all the way to Spain, North Africa. And so it traces their music and their dancing. And it's absolutely gorgeous music. So I know I'll always want to hear beautiful music and see beautiful dancing. So that's a movie I would want to keep.
I am sure they have a copy of it right at this moment.
Yeah, it's a 1993 movie. So my movie's references are a bit old, but that's okay.
Takes a mix.
You're marked by movies when you're young. Those
right.
are the movies that mark you the most. Yeah.
Well, and you curated a very fresh movie, so it's all different zones. What is the best movie to watch on a second date?
Well, I would say Sergei Bondarchuk's War and Peace. It's a 7-hour movie. That's the Russian version. Also, I think 1966, 67. And if my date can live through the first part, which is about 4 hours long, and wants to see the second part, then we're in for life.
You better have had a good first date before you uncork a 7-hour movie on the second one.
I was thinking about it, and as it turns out, it's just been released as a Blu-ray movie.
It recently had a re-release.
Right, so I just went ahead and ordered it the other day.
Well, it may not be a second date, but that could be an isolation date night.
Right. I loved it.
So what, sub-question A, what is your favorite topping on pizza?
Okay, so I don't eat cheese. I'll eat cheese with a Z. That's plant-based cheese. But my favorite topping is capers. Okay. It just gives that zing to pizza.
What is the best movie to watch while you eat a caper-topped cheese with the Z pizza on your couch?
Well, I would say Ratatouille. It's just such a delightful animation. And of course, it links me to French culture, Parisian cuisine. Of course, it would be vegan cuisine nowadays. When I saw Ratatouille, I wasn't there yet. But yeah, it's a delightful film all around. So it aligns itself very well with eating pizza.
And the Madeline moment when he eats the ratatouille comes back to the to the Proust, so it works well.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Good point. I didn't remember that offhand.
Last question. Take you back to 10 years old. So you're probably watching Rosemary's Baby.
Not quite.
You're 10 years old and you receive a screener from the future. What film most blows your mind?
Well, it has to be a futuristic movie. So I'll say 2001, A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. Came out in 1968 also. Very
68.
impressive.
You have two 68
Very,
films.
yeah,
I think
very
War and
impressive
Peace might be
movie.
68 too, actually. I have to
Which
think.
one?
No, it's 60. No, War and Peace is 67. I had to think for a second.
Yes.
But
And it's just perfect 60s movie with the end being the ultimate psychedelic trip.
right.
So that would have blown my mind when I was 10 years old.
That would have
It
been
blew
a
my
wild
mind
trip.
later.
Yeah, it still does. Hey, oh, 1 second. Let me do the calculations. Hey, it turns out you love movies.
I do. What
There
a
you are.
surprise.
And we loved having you tonight on Zoom Back Camera. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you all for tuning in. And oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I want to thank you, Ricky, for all your support and just organizing this. I had no idea when I started watching your shows that I would be in one. That was a great surprise and a little intimidating because some people are film scholars, and you know, I wanted to discuss a French movie, but it wasn't really available. So Okja was a perfect substitute, and it's a little beyond my knowledge because I'm not really into Korean movies, but I certainly appreciated it a lot.
Well, thank you for discussing it. And again, if people are interested, they can check out michianavegfest.org and learn more about all of the good things that happen year round and look forward, hopefully, to the rescheduled Veg Fest in October. Hopefully.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good night, everybody. We hope to see you throughout the rest of the week here on Zoom Back Camera. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.